Alright, so today I'm reviewing Mr. Earl. This is a horror novel or novella. It's written by Vince Savarin. It was released in May of 2024. It's about 132 pages long, written in third-person omniscient. Now, this is not Vince Savarin's debut novel, but it is his, I think he has about 3 or 4 novels at the moment. I think his first one was called Prodigal of Dominica, but I'm really bad with names, so I'm sorry if I got that wrong. I don't think there's an age range specified for Mr. Earl, but I'd say probably teens or older would probably be appropriate. Now, the premise of this this novel is that there's a teenager and he encounters a old and mysterious man who gives him a coin. And after that, his life has a number of unexpected twists and turns and a noticeable change in fortune that comes with some caveats, you could say. And that's probably about the most I could say without spoiling anything, because I don't want to spoil anything. So let's see here. So for our setting, I'm sorry, bear with me for a second, I got my notes right here. So the setting of this is on a Caribbean island. I think it's Dominica, but I'm not sure if it's actually said specifically or not. It's very unique for horror. It's really... It's just unusual for horror because usually, at least for me anyway, when I think of like a horror novel, I think of, either like New England if it's like a Stephen King story, or, something like the old Dracula films and such had, they're based out of Europe. It's just a tropical island's kind of unusual. It's a very unique setting. I thought it worked pretty well though. And let's see, I guess next will be characters. So there's of course a character named Earl. There's an old man who's mysterious, who also sometimes goes by the name Earl, which is kind of interesting. There's a priest named Father Birmingham, and there's a, I'm not sure if this is a spoiler, but Earl has a wife named Sharon, and later on he has a son who I think is called Earl Jr. or Little Earl. And Sharon has a brother named Philip, who is also friends with Earl. Of all these characters, I think Earl is probably like the most prominent one. But Father Birmingham also has some chapters are actually like his POV, even though he's not like the main POV character. It's actually rather interesting the way that the story is told, but I'll be covering that next in plot. But I like the characters; they're pretty good. So for the plot, it's really this whole idea is that you not you, Earl. Receives this coin and his fortunes suddenly change, but it's kind of like a curse. At first I was kind of reminded of Pirates of the Caribbean, like the first movie with Johnny Depp from I think it's 2003, where like the premise of that story is like they find a chest of gold coins and there's like a curse that goes with it. In this case it's actually, not to get too spoilery here, it's really more like the coin gives him good luck for a while, but there's also like bad luck that catches up with him. The story is really like a non-linear in that there's like time jumps back and forth. I know in my Substack review I mentioned Click, which is a 2007 movie, and It's a Wonderful Life, which is like a really old, Jeremy Stewart movie. And I think there was another film that I mentioned, probably with Butterfly Effect. When I was thinking of this YouTube review that I was coming up with, I also remembered, actually of all things, a movie called Mr. Destiny from the 90s. And the premise of that film was that there was this guy who thought back to his childhood, and if he basically won a baseball game, his whole life was going to turn out very differently. And I kind of got some vibes in this story like that, although this is cricket, not baseball. But it's kind of a similar idea in that, you get good fortune at some point in your life, and it can actually have like sort of a cascading effect, and it can have it can dramatically change the course of your life, for better or for worse. I could definitely tell like there were some Stephen King influences. It did kind of remind me of Storm of the Century. There was a 99 made-for-TV film, and like the first part of that, like the setup kind of reminded me of this a little bit. It's definitely a unique story, but I can definitely see like a Stephen King influence also in that, again, not to get too spoilery here, but like a character that's literally the devil does show up at one point, which reminded me kind of The Stand, if you've seen that film or read that book, where the devil does feature as someone who's like literally in the storyline. The last, I'd say about, I don't know, 30 pages of this book, I was reading out on my patio, and when I got to like page around 100 or so, I just read it nonstop. Like my glass of water with the ice cubes in it, like it just turned into water with no ice cubes by the time I looked up. And actually here, like the sun was going down, and I could hear some coyotes howling on the horizon. Of course, I'm in Texas, so kind of creepy, but you know, kind of fitting for a horror book, I guess. But I thought that the last 30 pages were definitely like really like it just ratchets it up a gear, and it keeps going until the end. And there is sort of like this idea at the end of like the story coming full circle, I guess you could say. I thought that was really it was done in a way I didn't expect. It kind of like snuck up on me, even though it's a short book. And there's really, I think the story has some aspects you could call almost mythological. And I always like mythology whenever it's in fiction. So I thought the plot was pretty good. Okay, so themes. Now, I remember in my Substack article I said for such a short book, it has some pretty big themes. And I think really it's kind of like desire, envy, and greed are these temptations. And they come up against faith and family and truth. And I think it's really, like it's all too common these days with social media and such for people to kind of feel like, you know, do you have to compromise your values to attain success? You know, do you have to betray who you actually are? And I mean, it's a very strong theme. I do remember noting that there's a film that came out a long time ago called A Man for All Seasons, and I forget the guy's name in it. I think it was, I don't know if it was Thomas something, I forget the guy's name, but it's based off of a real guy in English history. And there's this line in it that's like inspired by Mark 8:36, where he says, he asks a question like, does it benefit a man to gain the whole world if he loses his soul? And that's actually like, you know, it's a pretty good question. Let's see here. And I think that's all I noted here for the themes. Okay, inside. All right, the only thing I have listed here is I think something I already mentioned, which was that this is not Vince Savarin's first book. By the way, Vince is actually, I think he's studying to become a medical doctor in Dominica. And so, reading his bio, I was reminded kind of Michael Crichton in that, you know, he's like a medical doctor, but he also writes. Kind of interesting. I don't know many doctors and writers, I should say I don't know many doctors who are writers and many writers who are doctors. It's definitely a unique combination. And let's see here. I wrote this thing down for critique just because I know in my Substack article I mentioned there were some like grammar and spelling rules, and I actually reached out to Vince and emailed him, and I actually feel really bad for mentioning this because he was very apologetic. But I just felt the need to mention it just because, I mean, truth be told, I uploaded the manuscript for my own novel, and I had, I don't know, something like 50 grammatical errors I found, and I must have updated my manuscript like, gosh, I don't know, 15 times to get them all, and that's after I read through it carefully. So I mean, it happens to everyone who's a writer that there's like, you know, something occasionally slips through. But what I can tell you, and this is always to me the most important thing, when I read like the end at the end of the book, like I'm happy with what I've read, you know, and I consider reading this book time well spent. And you know, it's just something that I mean, we're all getting better as we go, and I'm sure that there are plenty of problems in my book too. So let's see here. Conclusions. Well, I'd say that Vince wrote a really unique story here, and I think if you like horror, I think you'll like the book. And I think if you're looking for like a short read, or just, you know, if you horror's not normally your thing, but you like short like novella length books, I think this is probably worth giving a shot to. So let's see here. All right, spoilers. So been trying not to spoil too much here. I hope I didn't spoil anything. So the old man being kind of like the devil or the serpent, I thought that was really interesting because looking at the setting itself, it's kind of like you could almost look at the tropical island like it's Eden, and the old man, who's like the evil villain the whole time, the devil, is like literally the serpent in the garden with the tempting people to not literally bite into an apple, but figuratively. I thought that was really kind of like an interesting symbol, and I thought that was a really interesting way to tell this particular story. The story kind of repeats at the end, where like the coin passes to someone else, who presumably like they're now going to have their own horror story. I thought that was interesting. This is almost like I think a long time ago there was like some episodic. I don't know the word. I'm sorry, but like if you ever saw like X-Files or something like that, sometimes like those old, not old, but sometimes television shows, they have the idea of like, the episode ends, but it also like begins again at the same time. Like, I'm explaining this probably really badly. Maybe I should just edit this out. I'm sorry. But it's kind of like, someone else gets the coin, and it's going to be another horror story beginning at the very end for somebody else. There's a moment here in this book where the old man, or the serpent, or I forget his name, I think it's like Mammon, I forget the demon's name, but he pretty much takes Earl to like a hillside and offers him the world. It reminded me of the old story, the temptation of Jesus, and that was pretty interesting. There's clearly a theme here, I think, of not just poverty and the need to succeed coming up against values and the conflict between the two. But I think another theme here that was, I didn't want to put in the theme section because it's kind of spoilers, but Earl has he has a father who's ill, and he also has a son, and I really got the idea that there was kind of a theme here of like fathers and sons, and like trying to provide guidance to the next generation. And, I guess that's really more of a family theme. But I remember writing down on my notes right here, really it seemed like what the message here was, don't lose yourself chasing success. And I think that's actually it's not just good advice in general. For a lot of indie authors, that's probably something that we need to remind ourselves of and to understand. And don't lose your connections with your family and your past. That's what I have here as the last bit of my notes for this book. So, I think this is pretty good. And I guess that's all, y'all. See you next time.